Hi, and welcome to the Brohoyo podcast, the podcast about Gacha in general and Hoyoverse games in specific. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co-host, David.
Hey everyone.
We're coming back from break, and why don't we start out with just a quick recap of what we've been up to during the holidays, at least Gacha-wise. Dave, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so over the holiday break, obviously time with family and everything like that, but in terms of from a gaming perspective, been dabbling still with Genshin, been dabbling, with Star Rail, building up teams. And in other Gacha news, I cleared out some Gachas off my phone. I have some others that I uninstalled and then maybe reinstalled, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Excited about the Malvika banner, and we'll be talking about her a little later. But the big thing Gacha-wise that's been occupying my time has been Girls Frontline 2 Exilium, which I know we're gonna dive into deeper on. And then outside of Gacha news, but still in gaming news, for Christmas, I received Unicorn Overlord for Christmas for the Switch, which is a strategy RPG from Atlas and I believe Vanillaware. So really enjoying that one. Um, and that's actually been occupying most of my time over the Christmas break. But what about you, Steve? What have you been able to sink your teeth into in between the holidays?
Well, it's been Genshin, it's been Star Rail. I reloaded up ZZZ, Zenless Zone Zero. With the most recent patch, they gave away a 5, for them it's a, I believe, SSR ranked character. So jumped back into that. Managed to get the new character, both of the new characters, both the free one and the not Nero samurai girl with the ears. So I was able to get her. I've been slowly building up that account and kind of trying to get back into it, get into the groove there. Enjoying some of the quality of life. Still have some complaints, but overall enjoying it. And like you, I did also load up Girls Frontline 2. Jumped into that when that came out, and that's been added to the Rota. And then, of course, Brown Dust 2 has also been on the Rota as well. Been playing through that in the 1.5 anniversary, the half-year anniversary. But I guess, all of that leads into the question of the episode, the theme of today, which is what is it that hooks you on a gacha game? Like, what keeps you playing after the honeymoon period, that starter period where they're drowning you in materials, they're giving you all sorts of pools, they're making you get invested in the game, but what keeps that game on your phone or on your Rota, your daily login list? Why do what hooks you as far as a gacha game goes? And I guess, Dave, I'll again kick it back over to you. Do you have any initial thoughts and anything that you're like, 100% that's the thing that get me going?
Sure. So for me, when trying out new games in general, I think for Gacha, we'll keep it in the Gacha verse in terms of what gets me to try a game and then ultimately stick with the game. So it's usually one of a few factors has to stand out to me or really appeal to me. And in no particular order, and I may over the course of this discussion come up with the order as I talk about it, but in no particular order as of now, gameplay, actual gameplay has to be something, interesting or significant. When I look at gotchas, we had, a time period where everybody was kind of doing the same thing, or maybe just like a shade off of the same thing, being that typical like Summoner's War format, where it was, you have your 4 characters, they have 2 or 3 abilities, and it's turn-based. We saw that replicated into things like Raid Shadow Legends or Epic 7 and things of that nature. That type of turn-based strategy to me got very repetitive. So I was looking for something fresh, something new or innovative. Is usually what will capture my attention. And so I go back to a game like Nikke when that first was being put out to us for us to see. Yes, there's the obvious, fan servicey aspect of it, but the fact that it was a rail shooter was something different, and it took me back to, my youth in an arcade playing Time Crisis. I was like, oh, okay, so it has similar elements to that. It's not something that a gotcha game has done. Let's see what it's about,
Mhm.
right? And we go into that. Or other unique play, like with recently with Girls Frontline 2 Exilium, being somebody who was a fan of the XCOM style of play, when I saw that that was going to be something that a gotcha game tried out, even though I'd only maybe played the original Girls Frontline, which is a completely different play
Mhm.
style of game, I'd only played that for maybe a little bit years ago. I was still intrigued to try this one out because of intriguing gameplay that nobody has really done. That at least that's come stateside maybe, or to global servers, I should say.
Mhm.
Um, so that's item number one. Is the gameplay unique or something different than what quote unquote everybody else is doing? Now, if it does have that gameplay that everybody else is kind of doing, that we all the turn based stuff, that's not going to say I'm not going to try you, I'm not going to play you, but it means you have to stand out somewhere else because the gameplay is it's okay, but it's nothing trend setting or groundbreaking. And so usually with a game like that, you got to have something else going on for you. So for me, maybe is it the story, right? Is something in the story intriguing or making the characters interesting, or I'm getting attached to characters, and so I want to learn more about them and their backstory.
Mhm.
'Cause I think we joke about skip buttons being available in some games or not being available in others. But when it boils down to it, for some of these games, the story is literally, if you're not reading the story and you're having the game on autoplay, then are you really playing the game, right? Like, what do you even have it on there for,
Mhm.
right? So, an intriguing story or intriguing characters would be another thing that I would look at that would help me stick with a gotcha after the honeymoon phase, and particularly if it's again in that same turn-based Epic 7 style combat or format there. And then the last thing for me, or maybe the third thing here that's coming top of mind, will be just the aesthetics of the game. So what kind of genre is it? Is it a high fantasy thing? Is it a cyberpunk thing? Are the characters visually, attractive? Like, do they look good, crisp, clean?
Mhm.
Something like that Genshin did very well, right? So they had the open world aesthetic, which was relatively new to gotchas. I think maybe it'd been done, but not with as high of a production value as Genshin had. And then the characters themselves, they all have, backstories and personalities that are well brought out or fleshed out through various quests. And so you become attached to those characters, and they look really good and unique. And that carries over to Star Rail as well, which Star Rail built off of the good faith we'd gotten in Genshin in terms of production value. And I think taking that even a step further, I think they've maybe done a better job ingratiating themselves to their player base, I would say. But those would be, I guess, the three key main points for me. And Steve, I'll throw it to you. If you want to expand on any of those, or maybe there's something else that draws you and keeps you in a gotcha game after that honeymoon phase.
Well, I mean, I feel like the three that you mentioned for me are upfront draws. Um, but what actually keeps, like, that'll get me to try the game, but I don't know if that necessarily will always keep me after that honeymoon phase. Because I'm going to point to ZZZ and Wuthering Waves are both good examples from last year. Both played them. We actually played them on, not on stream, but we did let's plays together of them for the channel, and both of us bounced off. And I would argue that they both met sort of the criteria that you set, which are those sort of, they're both very pretty games. They were both well done. They were, to be fair, both of them were kind of fighting for the same gameplay style of intense action game or technical action game over Genshin's more basic action game. But both of us kind of bounced off of those, and so in my mind, it's okay. Why did we bounce off of those? And I think for me, it was quality of life features. That I'm very picky about the daily grind and the quality of life features that a game has, where I'm only willing to spend so much time and so much energy on a gotcha game on a daily basis. I don't mind logging in and playing through the story explicitly to play through the story, but if you're wanting me to grind for materials, I don't want to have to spend 5 minutes playing through this same pretty easy little arena fight over and over and over again in order to get the materials I need in order to level up a character. If I need to level up a character, I don't want to have to run around the open world in order to grab materials. These are all complaints that before the recording I had about Genshin and I had about other games where it was hey, I'm really not loving doing this. I would rather something a little bit more quality of life, a little bit easier, something a little bit less of a chore to do in order to upgrade and maintain my characters. I don't necessarily have a problem with like gear grinds where, hey, you have to do this over and over and over again for gear, as long as that central gameplay loop is, enjoyable. But if it's the same gameplay loop as what I need to do in order to get my talents up or my skills up or that I need for leveling materials, I'm less of a fan. I'm one of those insane people who didn't necessarily mind the simulated universe grind in order to get, the orb and the rope in Honkai Star Rail. I'm happy that they put in the quality of life update and fix for that. But I was one of the people who's like, yeah, I don't mind doing simulated universe. I love doing it
What
every
is
week.
your universe rank at, Alex? I know they just expanded it to 100, and I had been meaning to ask you. Do you know what yours is at right now?
100.
It is at 100. Okay.
I haven't next.
I think I'm like 58, 59, somewhere around there, maybe in the 60s. So I was
Yeah.
like, surely you're up there, but maxed. Okay, sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
you're good. You're good. Yeah, I pretty much max it out within the first week or two of it coming out. So, yeah, I really like simulated universe. I like roguelikes, but stuff like that. That those are sort of the that ease of play, that ability to slot it into my schedule, because I really don't want to spend more than an hour on all of my gacha on any given day, just because I don't know how busy I'm going to be. Weekdays, I've got work, I've got other things going on. I don't want to be really spending a whole bunch of time doing this and having to fight with the game in order to try and slot it in, especially because, again, I've got roughly 5 games at this point that I'm playing daily. And that's about my carry capacity as far as that goes. But do you find that sort of the issues that I brought up are things that kind of knock you off of gacha games?
Well, I think you bring up a good point to kind of go back to something you said about with Wuthering Waves and ZZZ for us. How, yeah, by the parameters I set up, you think, Dave, you'd still be playing those games. Why? But as I admitted, yeah, I'm not. They're not currently on my computer. I'm not currently looking to go back to them. And I think an important thing to note, and I guess, I can throw this out there. I'll make an analogy in that. So those 3 things that I mentioned, yeah, those are things I'm looking at to get me in the door. And then ultimately, if I'm enjoying one of those things or maybe multiple of those things, right, I'm going to maintain past the honeymoon phase. But I guess another important element isn't so much of what the game has going for it. It's, and here comes the analogy, it's, do I already have that part of the food pyramid filled, right?
Okay.
Like, if I'm having a Dr. Pepper and I'm getting a bunch of sugar at lunch, right? I'm not going to have a Dr. Pepper and then also go have a bowl of ice cream because I've already got my sugar intake, right? I'm only getting one of those things, right? And with gacha games, it would be the same thing. It's like, well, those 2 games in a vacuum on their own are pretty good, and if one of them had come to me first and I hadn't sunk 4 years in a Genshin, I would probably pick one of those 2 and still be playing them, because again, I'm not going to necessarily play both, because gameplay wise, again, they have their specific idiosyncrasies that they both do, but it's like different seasoning on a steak, right? They're both steaks, and it's just slightly different seasoning between Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero. But meanwhile, I'm already halfway through a steak that seasoning is pretty good too in Genshin, so I don't need more. I don't need a 3rd and 4th steak, and you, as a steak lover, this is a terrible. So like, yes, bring me more steak. Brazilian steakhouses, yes, please. Like, my card is green. Bring me more meat in that regard. So that's where my analogy falls apart. But I think you all get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
So yeah, that's why those wouldn't still be there. It's because I'm already getting that fill through Genshin now. If you just reiterate your point now that I've gone down my bunny trail here, and I'll wrap back to what you actually asked me.
No problem. Now you threw me off. Yeah, basically, I at least for me, I've found that that the quality of life matters a lot more, especially leveling up characters. And I guess this might technically be a second point, um, where I find that a lot of games will, or a lot of gotcha games will roadblock you as far as advancing your character in ways that can be overly frustrating, where you're ready to move on. You're ready to proceed with the story. You're ready to proceed with the content. You've got, especially if you start, if you're a 0 day player, if you're a launch player, you might be drowning in materials that, first honeymoon period, but they're not going to let you get past level 30 because you haven't gotten all of your characters exactly where they want them, or you just haven't logged in enough times. Like, you haven't done enough dailies for them to be like, oh, well, you have to do a couple more dailies. You need to log in for 3 days straight before we'll let you get past level 30. And then we're going to cap you at level 40. And then we're going to cap you again at level 50, or what have you. That's just one system I've seen. For Genshin and Honkai, adventurer level, where you'll hit
Mhm.
a point in the story, and they'll go, hey, you have to be at least this adventurer level, and you could have done every quest up till that point. You could be completely thorough and have done everything, and you're not going to be at that adventure level. You need to do dailies because that's basically the only way that you're going to get that up, or you have to burn a bunch of resin, or energy, or whatever the resource is, depending on the game, in order to basically grind inefficiently in order to get some materials and also get the adventure level that you need, or the account level that you, in order to then proceed.
Yeah, I think for mechanics like that you referenced, 'cause yeah, Genshin did this. It was what, Traveler level 27 or whatever. I think it was the notorious
Yeah,
one, right?
it's like
Where you
27
just
or 29,
I'm
something like that.
it's like I'm level 25. I've done all the things, and it's just you got to do like 2 days worth, or like you mentioned, burn some resin. While I would agree completely that kind of soft locking content like that is very annoying, to just make me wait 2 more days when I'm like, no, I have the time now. Um, yeah, as someone who would just am playing now, I would like to be able to play now because I know I can play now, so let me play now. You know, like that is very frustrating. And it's, man, it's kind of white knighting Hoyoverse a little bit, and they don't need defending or anything, but it's like I have to have the frame of mind that this is ultimately a gotcha game. It's not a AAA game that I dropped $60 on, and therefore the developers have their money, so let's give me everything. It's the game is ultimately incentivizing me to try and get me to spend money, um, and so I just have to come to terms with that, I guess. And but
Well,
it's not necessarily a deal breaker because I still play games that do that, and it's just an annoyance that I deal with for those 2 days, and then I move on because I'm a relatively patient person. And then when it comes to gotcha gaming like this, I think that's part of the reason I play and try so many gotcha games is because I'm incredibly patient in terms of building an account, and not worrying about having like spending an absorbent amount of money, like I would maybe worry about with some people that I know that I'm glad they don't play gotcha games.
yeah. Well, and
Um,
I guess
but go
for
ahead.
my example, Zenless Zero is one of the games that annoyed me and I bounced off of. I think primarily for that reason, where there was so much going on, there was so much. It was such a pain in order to get an account where I wanted it, and the hoops that I had to jump through in order to get there were just frustrating enough that I went, you know what? Why am I doing this? I dread logging in to try and do the dailies, do the little story quests, especially because of the time of day mechanic in there, where oh, okay, you have to meet somebody in the evening at this location, and it's just one where it's like, look, just why? I understand from a RP point of view. I kind of got it from a like, oh, they're aping Persona, point of view, but Persona works because time management is one of the central mechanics of that series. You play for a year of school, and there's no backseas. If you have your character sleep an afternoon, That is an afternoon that you have lost. The clock is ticking in Persona, and you definitely have enough time to get everything done, but that prioritization, that time management is the mechanic of that game, but ZZZ doesn't have that. Like, ZZZ's clock is the finite nature of the universe and the fact that I will one day pass away, which, okay, I mean, that is a timer, but maybe don't remind me of that.
This got dark.
Yeah. Maybe you
Darker than
shouldn't
some
do
of those
that.
Persona stories. Goodness gracious.
Yeah. Well, hey, Persona 3 has a theme.
Yes, it does.
But and those of you who know. But just let me play the game. Like the more hoops that they make you jump through, the more walls they put in your way. They have to find that balancing. And I find that for some games it works. Girls Frontline, talking about that one. Girls Frontline locks you at whatever your current account level is. You cannot level a character higher than whatever your current account level is. I believe the max is going to be 60 for the character level, or is it 50% on that?
I have no idea. I'm just enjoying the game, but go ahead.
Yeah, but
to your point.
To my point, both of us, to my knowledge, have finished the story that's available so far, and I was able to complete it at level 30. At this point, I'm basically just grinding to be able to get my characters up to max level. This way I can start doing quote-unquote in content.
To clarify, that's because there were 6 chapters released on launch. I believe the 7th just came out with the last patch, and then there's also the hard mode for all these. So I do want you to clarify what you mean by you've completed the campaign.
We've completed the first 6 chapters that were released at launch.
On normal and hard? Because if you did it on hard...
I don't consider playing through hard as completing the story. Hard is a challenge mode.
Okay, fair enough.
Hard is there. It's hard. It's there for extra.
I was about to ask you for your strategies because I am struggling in chapter 4 and I'm low.
No, I've made it to end of chapter 3. I'm just at the beginning of chapter 4. I'm in there.
On hard mode, to clarify. Struggling on hard mode, folks. We're not struggling on normal. That's well and done within the first weeks of launch.
Yeah, we were able to complete the story up to the point that it was relevant at like level 20, 30, I think is where it maxes it.
So I'm bunny trailing us again, but it wouldn't be a show without me bunny trailing us or you going on a rant. So we got my bunny trail out of the way. We'll talk plenty about Girls Frontline 2 in a bit. So let's jump back to your point.
Yeah, but my point is that I was able to experience the story and get invested, and then I can put in the grind instead of getting locked out without any chance to really get invested. Or if, for example, instead of they'd given us 3 chapters where we played through 3 chapters and then they'd ended and been like, okay, well, you're not going to get anything else for a while. Like, okay. That's what I felt like ZZZ did, is that you got to the end of it and it was sort of just a stop. There wasn't anything to pull you on or really keep you going, getting invested in the story in that sense. So, the balancing of accessibility or not accessibility, the balance of being able to actually get invested in the game versus the walls that they put in place in order to try and force you to make it a habit, if that makes sense. And,
I would agree to an extent with that. Yeah, as far as what keeps me playing is has something grabbed me to make me invested in the game, and it's harder to get invested in a game that is locking you from getting into the story or getting into characters, backgrounds or things like that. Which, like you said, there was not really any blocking that in Girls Frontline 2 with their launch. Maybe a little bit on a couple of the levels, but there was I didn't feel like I ran into it as frequently as I did in Genshin or ZZZ. To what you were saying.
And I guess for my final one, which is this one, I fully admit is going to come across as petty, where it's you do this too much or too little, you have to hit my Goldilocks zone, is either throwing too much at you in order to get your character up and going, or not throwing enough at you. And again, I'm going to use ZZZ as one example, Zenless Zone Zero as one example, which is it's a Hoyoverse game. I know how Hoyoverse games work. I know basically their leveling systems are fairly bog standard. You're going to have your character level, you're going to have your skill level, you're going to have your equipment. And typically those are about the 3 axes that you have when leveling up a character. And I felt like it took forever to get anywhere on those axes, where you had character level, but it was just enough of a pain in the butt trying to get that up. And then it was very annoying trying to get skills, and then you couldn't even unlock relevant gear. The disk drives that they have for that. You couldn't even really unlock that for quite a while. So it just, I knew where I wanted to be in that game, but because everything was locked behind player level, it took forever to try and get that unlocked. On the counter side of that, if you throw everything at the player at the beginning, they don't know what to focus on, and it's overloading. Where it's like, okay, wait, I have to get 5 characters, and then I have to get them all leveled up, and then each skill needs to be leveled, and to do that, I need to get copies of the character, or do I need to run this dungeon? Okay, now I need gear, etc., etc. So there is also a Goldilocks zone as far as that aspect of it. Overwhelming or locking so much stuff behind gates and walls that you can't really ever get your character finished because they want to keep you on that tread. And I guess that would be my last one. Again, I admit that one's a little bit petty, but have you run into anything like that, Dave?
Well, I'm kind of thinking about what you were saying. And I was looking at it from maybe a slightly different perspective, and maybe I throw this at you and get your thoughts.
Okay.
In that, for a game like Zenless Zone Zero, they're introducing you to each new thing like very slow. Like you don't unlock. Like first you get the characters, and then you learn about leveling up the characters, and then maybe you learn about the weapons. I forget what they're exactly called, but we'll move past that terminology, right? So then you learn about weapons, and you learn about leveling up your weapons. Then you learn about skills and leveling up your skills, and then you learn about your discs, which are the equipment, right? And then you learn about leveling those up. And so you never feel like you're really steamrolling any content. Like you never feel overpowered. Whereas maybe another game that gives it to you all at once, and you have the access to level up all these different things or whatever have you, there are times where you will feel like you're leveling up, like the equivalent of like in a traditional game, doing all the side quests, going to the first boss, and just absolutely like rolling over them because you're just
pancaking them.
Because you've gotten all this gear and you've gotten all this experience from other things, and that's not and this isn't necessarily like a Genshin exclusive thing. That like this is other gotchas, don't give you the ability to feel super overpowered either. But I wonder if that is maybe psychologically or in your subconscious, like this isn't. I'm not steamrolling this content, even though I feel like I've done everything I can unlock because that's all the game will give me, and so there's that little frustration there, as opposed to a game that maybe allows you more freedom to level up and more access to all those things. You're like, okay, I can really gear up my party and go, and then this other content will at least be a lot easier because I've already maxed out everything that I can, because the game's given me access to max those things out, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I actually think you're onto a good point there, where because when you hold back on access to the levers that you need in order to make a character more powerful, and you only really give them the most basic ones, for example, character level. In most gacha games, character level is probably the least, or at least most Hoyoverse games. Character level is not that important. For the entire patch of 1.0 of Genshin, everyone was saying don't bother leveling to max, only get to 80, I think, was the...
Yeah, get to 80.
Yeah, 90, you get to 80, and you don't bother pushing for 90 because there's no benefit on a cost benefit analysis. There was no benefit to going to 90 because you could clear all the content at 80. The way stuff scaled didn't matter that much, and it gave you the chance to get to rank 10 talents and so forth, but 8 was good enough. 8 was basically good enough.
Hell, the trial characters they give you are 80 out of 90.
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah, they were 80 out of 90. The talents were all
still
set
be. I haven't
80.
checked in a minute.
I think they're maxed now. And I think talents are they're not, talents aren't maxed. I think they're still sitting at like 8 out of 10. But I haven't checked. I don't know. I play through the trials and then I move on with my life to see whether I like the character. But yeah, like because level doesn't matter all that much, the ability to level up a character feels like it should be more meaningful, but it's not really doing anything. You're not really able to get your talents up and going. You mentioned you have to level your weapons and level your gear, which is just another axis that you have to try and work on in order to try and get, keep caught up. So not giving you access to all those tools keeps you perpetually in this state of like, well, okay, but this isn't really like I'm constantly going against the head. And so I think you're right that that's part of my frustration with that.
Yeah, like you power up, but the enemies just get spongier and spongier, so you don't feel that burst in power growth in your team.
at
That's
least until you
another
get to the
part.
end game, and then it's a completely different game because now everything you can get everything maxed, and you're doing all sorts of damage. And what used to be frustrating content is now a breeze. But
And there were two more points that I wanted to bring up. One was yeah, in reference to we talk about all the different ways that we have to level up things, and I think part of this too is potentially as for what makes the game more likely to stay in the rotation is are these different resource grinds, and this is my opinion. You may have a completely different opinion, but are the resource grinds content that is similar to what you're doing in the main story? So basically, your same team is what you use in that extra the resource grind, or does that does the resource grind for some of those things ask you to build a different team specific for that content? And I'll use Epic 7 as an example because I'm also going to use it as my example, my second thing I was going to say. Because in Epic 7, you have your team, you have an arena team, you have maybe your story team, and then you have your hunt team. But even within your hunts, there's like what there were 5 or 6 hunts. There may be more now since I quit playing. But there were 5 or 6 different hunts for different types of gear. So were you going for the speed gear? Were you going for the attack gear, the defense gear, HP gear, etc.? And depending on which gear you were going for, corresponded with a different boss element. So you weren't necessarily using, well, you definitely weren't using for the hardest boss levels the same teams. You were using ones that were advantageous. So if you were fighting the fire dragon, you were going to bring your water team. So it asked you to build a water team. If you were going to fight the grass boss, you were going to build a fire team and bring your fire team. And so is that something that adds to the enjoyment because that's making you build and strategize and think about other teams? Or is that something, Steve, that would frustrate you because you're like, I built my one team. I would just like to stick with this team and use it in all content.
um, if it's something I have to grind for, if it's something that I need for a basic material in order to get my team up and going, I don't mind it if a certain team has an advantage, but I want to be able to clear it with anything. My go-to example would be the Calyxes in Honkai Star Rail. A lot of them have bonuses for or domains in Genshin. A lot of them have bonuses to certain types of characters, certain types of teams, certain strategies, but you can clear any of them with any team and be okay. If I have to build a specific team in order to be successful at, getting those materials, I will get very angry and very annoyed because you're caught in a catch 22 where in order to get more powerful and succeed, I need to get more powerful and I need to build this other team that I can't build because I have to get to the thing that's preventing me from accessing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
You
and,
know,
and this kind of bleeds into what my second point was going to say. Again, using Epic 7 as the example, because this is one of the reasons I quit playing Epic 7. Because you're playing it for the story. I was a day one Epic 7 player from launch, and I quit. I think a few years into it because it got to the point where the story quests were forcing you to use like a specific, you know,
mhm.
a specific unit or a specific number of units, and then build around those units. And if you didn't have those units at all, you were kind of SOL. Or if you didn't have them built, well, then you had to spend the time building that specific character, maybe for that one specific end of chapter boss type thing. And so I think the point you just made is kind of what I'm referring to and not liking that. Now, the modes where you have like maybe a specific element or like in Nikkei, like manufacturer towers, right?
Mhm.
Where you can mix and match within the element or the manufacturer type, but it doesn't require you to like use this specific water unit or this specific manufacturer unit. It could be any one of those. I find those to be more enjoyable because then it's kind of like a playground, right? You're popping out parts and popping in new ones and seeing which ones synergize better. But that's where the kind of the theory crafting, the old theory crafter in me comes out and has some fun with it, because you kind of have that flexibility and fluidity to try out different units and how they play with each other, as opposed to I think taking it to the extreme and where it gets not fun is when it's like, nah, this is the one unit you have to use to fully like clear this, get all the rewards or the best chances of whatever drops you want to get, and you have to play around that one character. But if you give it to me where it's like, I have to use these sets of characters, so whatever element it is, and I got to build around this, that's fine too. Now, the big thing to note here, I think, because this maybe sounds contradictory to what I've said maybe in past episodes, the big note here is how much investment do I have to put into a character in order for them to be relevant? Because, like you mentioned, levels aren't really a thing in Genshin. It's the items, it's the talents, it's the weapon levels. It's not necessarily the character levels. Whereas character levels are a big proponent in maybe some other gacha games, and so all you have to focus on is that, and then the talents and weapons and stuff will come later. That makes it a little bit easier to be more out of the box friendly than I know we've voiced in the past. Genshin or Star Rail tend to be.
True. I would also note that like the Nikkei towers are optional content. Like they are bonus rewards. They are not locking character progression. You're not running into
Fair
a
point.
scenario like I'm thinking Brown Dust, where you have to grind for the gems that you need for each element. Where, and to be fair, that's not a case where something is hard locked behind a certain team. But just as an example, it's not those type of gems where in order to increase a character's talents or skills, you would have to already have a character that is good at doing the thing in order to carry you, in order to make your other character more powerful. With the towers, it's just a, hey, here's a playground. The higher up the tower you go, the more rewards you get. Have fun. That I think is more reasonable than locking story content or locking progression, like character progression behind
tower progression behind a different time gate. But we can talk more about that because I know we got a lot of other things to talk to.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all I had here, unless you had anything else you wanted to add or some final thought.
No, I hope that we were coherent throughout it, or at least that I was coherent throughout it. I thought you were fine, Dave. But I know we went on some bunny trails. We were a little bit all over the place, but as far as things that hook us, I think that we covered that topic pretty good.
Awesome. Well, I know with essentially a couple of weeks since our last recording, we have a lot of other things to get to. Like we've talked about, we have a bunch of anniversaries and launches for gachas, but I want to keep it in the Hoyoverse universe, and we have some events. We'll talk about ones that are still active or will still be active, not ones that we maybe have come and gone since we last posted up an episode. But we do also want to talk about a few different characters in Genshin and Star Rail that have launched as well. But we'll jump in with events first. And I do want to get to that, so we'll jump on over there. So looking at events, Steve, I think we have one going on with Honkai Star Rail. If you want to dive in and let us know what we have going on with the Cosmic Home Decor event.
Yeah. So Honkai Star Rail currently has the Cosmic Home Decor event. It is basically the crux of the event is you go around and you get a room for your Trailblazer. You get to design it yourself. It's a sort of mini teapot, basically, for Honkai Star Rail. The main gameplay loop of it is you have to assign chores and then kind of try and maximize the points that you can get while assigning chores to various members of the crew. It's a fine little event. It's fun for what it is, gives pretty good rewards, and again, gives you a neat little cosmetic sort of teapot type space for you to enjoy with your Trailblazer, as well as a bath scene for those of you who want a bath scene from Honkai Star Rail. But that's about it. Fairly low overhead, pretty fun. I enjoyed it. Have you?
It was quick, easy. It did take me a full round of doing it to realize, 'cause I didn't read. I was just like, oh yeah, I get it. Okay, I get it. But then I didn't actually get it.
Mm.
But as far as like the movement of the number on the cards, I thought that was how much experience they gained, and it's how much you move along the board. And it took me a full round to realize that. So my first playthrough was very crappy, but then after that, it was S pluses all the way. Um, so yeah, enjoying that event. Um, Moving on from events though, but still in the Hoyoverse world, we got a lot of characters that have come out over the past couple weeks. So we're going to keep it with banners that are kind of ongoing at the moment here. So in Genshin, obviously the big one that we've all been waiting for is Mauvika. She is finally here upon us after a few months of teasing and Archon quests and witnessing her power. Now we get to hold it in our hands if we so choose to. I did. Missed out on Jalonin, but it guaranteed my Mauvika pull. So we did get Mauvika. She came home a little bit in the process of pulling her. But a brief rundown for Mauvika. Basically, she can be an on-field main DPS. She can be an off-field DPS, kind of however you want to build her as far as either of those roles. But she is ultimately a DPS of the Pyro variety, using the great swords, claymores would be the weapons there. So still in the early stages, but I do just kind of want to break down very quickly because again, we do have a lot to get to as far as kind of ways to build her. So obviously her best weapon is going to be the signature weapon there, but um, other options would include things like Wolf's Gravestone, Serpent Spine, Mailed Flower if you're going for that. You have the artifact set, the Obsidian Codex, seems to be the one that's recommended for a lot of the Natlan users. And then breaking down the artifacts on those sands, you're going to be looking for attack percentage, goblet pyro damage, circlet crit rate or crit damage, and then of course substats, crit damage, crit rate, attack percentage, elemental mastery, right? So pretty straightforward as far as a DPS build. Some example teams for her, if you're going for a melt team, would be her, Jalonin, Bennett, and I think Saitali as well. And then a vaporized team, again, just sub out Saitali for like Farina, or somebody like that for the hydro application, would be strong users. If you're looking at using Mauvika as a sub DPS, again, similar weapons to those that I mentioned. For the artifacts, you have the flexibility for Obsidian Codex, or you could use the Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City. Artifact main stats, substats are the same. Team comp, are maybe slightly different. Some examples of those, again, Jalonin, maybe somebody like Candace, who I know we've mentioned her in the past before, and we're seeing a little bit more utility from her. But also like Milani in that type of group. Again, she's off field in that build. Or you can also do like a burning team. So it'd be somebody like her and Bennett, Kanish, and then Emily would be a good burning team for her as well. So really strong from I think the initial testing and then the numbers that I'm seeing for. So kind of excited to build her myself. Though am going to be somebody who doesn't have a secondary limited Natland character. It is recommended to have like a second Natland character based off of the way her ultimate skill charges, but it's not necessarily a requirement. It just does feed it a lot fast. But yeah, really excited about her. I don't know, Steve, you have any thoughts on Mauvika? And then, of course, you can also go into our other Genshin character with Saitali going on.
Yeah, I'll start with Mauvika real quick. I'm really excited for her as well. I think that she has a lot going for her. I am a little, if I'm going to be honest, I am a little disappointed in her kit, not in the power level, but how limited it is. That she's really the first Archon that seems location locked to the degree that she is, because she does scale so much off of Night Soul that I think I would have preferred somebody who was a little bit more generalist, that wasn't quite tied to a singular mechanic in that way. Um, you know, Raiden scales off of ultimates, and ultimates are just a base kit thing. That Furina scales off of HP loss. HP is just a universal thing. Healing is a universal thing. So on and so forth. So the fact that she is so limited has me a bit confused, if I'm being 100% honest. But based off of everything I've seen on her numbers and so on and so forth, I do not think that she is in any way, shape, or form a bad character. Just kind of left scratching my head, kind of going like, this is an interesting direction, and I'm curious to see what's going to go on with the Tsaritsa, with sort of this new odd one out sort of setup that we've got. But regardless, let's move on to Sitlali. Whatever. Sitali.
Yeah, there's an extra L in there. I kind of was, I was skipping over a little bit, I guess, in my pronunciation. But yeah,
Whatever.
Awesome pronunciations, you know.
Yeah. So she is a cryo catalyst user, the first cryo catalyst user that we have. And she is definitely a support character. She seems to be mostly focused on melt or freeze, since she shreds hydro and pyro res, and she does offer off-field cryo application and shielding. She does scale off of elemental elemental mastery. So you are primarily going to want to build her as an elemental mastery character. Pretty much all of her substats and main stats are good. Her big main stat that you're going to want is elemental mastery. Her primary substat is more elemental mastery on anything that can't take it as the main stat. Her big strengths are that she provides defensive support for teams, along with those pyro and hydro res shreds. Again, off-field cryo application from her skill. Her elemental burst has pretty good damage scaling, has pretty solid damage scaling, and in combination with melt and elemental mastery scaling, you can get some big numbers off of that if that's the direction you choose to take her. She also does have some movement. We didn't mention Malvika's movement ability, which is her motorcycle and the ability to glide with that. Ability is that she can basically jump very high in the air and then glide. So a combination of Kazuha and the ability to glide, which is something every character has with a wind glider. So she's primarily a support. If you're going to build her as a shield support, you're going to want to take Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City. You want the 4-piece set for that. And again, Elemental Mastery in all fields, and then Energy Recharge just to get her ult up all the time. But other than that, defensive stats just to keep her up and going. And if you're going to go a more hybrid route, you're still going to want Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City. That is a long relic or artifact set name. You're going to want, that artifact set, but you can mix in cryo damage or crit rate in as, the goblet or circlet stats. And for your substats, grab crit damage, crit rate. For teams, it's going to be either a standard melt team or a standard freeze team. So, for example, you could take Malvika, Zalonin, Sitlali, and Bennett, and that'll give you a very solid melt team. If you're going a more freeze-heavy team, you can go Sitlali, a Pyro DPS of your choice, Arlecino, Hu Tao. Yeah, Hu Tao. Or I was going to say Nahida, but I can't believe Yelan. There we go. Yelan and Bennett. So you can build her rather flexibly as long as you're looking to go either freeze or. But that is pretty much her. The last sort of thing I guess I'll touch on is for talent priority. You're going to want to go skill, burst, and attack last. But that is her, and I'll pass it back over to you, Dave, for few.
Yeah, so diving into Honkai Star Rail, so we had few drop. So Tinyun, our dead fox girl, not so dead like most of us probably expected and thought. So Fugue is back. She is a fire element walking in the path of nihility. However, her synergies actually are more so with break teams than dot teams. But we'll dive into that here in a little bit. For her best light cones, obviously, signature light cone is going to be her best cone, which is the long road leads home. Second option would be the free-to-play 4-star one, the resolution shines as pearls of sweat. So either one of those would be serviceable. There are some other options for her for specialized cases, or like if you're having trouble getting her break effect to the recommended break points, in that being like that 220%, 250% break effect. If you're having trouble getting there, solitary healing would be a good choice, which is the I believe that's the freebie one out of Herta's store that you can S5 for doing simulated universe a whole bunch. So Steve, you probably have this one S5 for sure.
Yeah.
And then of course, as a Nihility character, the classic before the tutorial mission starts, always a good fill in there for her as well, for any Nihility character really. And then if you didn't do that event, I believe they recently added it
Yeah, it's available in
to
the
one of
Divergent
the
universe.
right. I was like, yeah, isn't it available with a few other of those 4-star cones that were exclusive? So if you miss out on that event, you now have access to that one. So that's nice, because if not for Fugue and you're just a Nihility team person, this is usually a solid one around all around. But jumping back into Fugue, for the best relic set, being a supporter type of character and enabling your stronger DPS, she's pretty flexible in terms of her relic sets. While the Iron Cavalry against the Scourge would be probably one of her best relic sets for just, again, break effect such, and just enabling the team a little bit more. That would be the best. But if not, you can go Thief of the Shooting Meteor, so she can get a little bit more energy, perhaps. Or you can do like a 2-and-2. You can kind of mix and match Thief of Shooting Meteor with, again, the Iron Cavalry against the Scourge. You can do Watchmaker, or if you need a little bit more speed, you can mix it in there with Messenger, Trapping, Hackerspace, or one of the newer sets, the Surdos's Relived Ordeal. I'm going to pretend that's how it's pronounced. So pretty flexible in terms of those. And then in terms of the planetary sets, you're looking at Forge of the Calpagni Lantern, which again, just because the 2-piece increases her speed by 6%. And then if the wearer hits an enemy targets with fire weakness, then the wearer's break effect increases by 40%, right? So again, just how can we get more break effect on this unit, right? That's what we're looking for. Stats for the items for the body, you're looking for effect hit rate. Feet, you're looking for speed boots. For the sphere, you're looking for HP or defense. Either one's fine. And then for the link rope, looking for more break effect, again, to get you to that threshold, or if you have enough break effect, you can go with some energy regen rate. So again, when we're building her, the goal is to get her break effect up to that 220% threshold when she's in combat, or if you're not in combat, it would be, I think it's 190%. I get her effect hit rate to about 67%, and then speed, HP, defense to fill in the gaps there and get as much as possible. For team comps, again, since she is a new unit, we don't have Memory of Chaos numbers yet for exactly how she performs or what her best team is in terms of cycling. But some teams that she has some good synergy with from some of the theory crafting, we have a Firefly team. So it'd be her, Firefly, either Ruan May or the Harmony Traveler, and then Lingsha or Gallagher. You can also be a little ballsy and go with no sustain, and so you could do something like Firefly, Fugue, Ruan May, and then the Harmony Traveler, right? If you want to do that and drop Lingsha or Gallagher, if you don't have either of them built, and you're not worried about dying for whatever reason.
Yeah.
She does have some synergy with Rappa as well. Again, Rappa, Lingsha, Ruan May. Again, Ruan May being another break effect synergistic supporter. There's also a Himiko team people have thrown out there. There's a Boot Hill team. Again, seeing a lot of the similar supports with Ruin May, Lingsha. For Boot Hill, you also have kind of the option with Abronia or Sunday as well. And then bringing it back to, since she is a Nihility character, she does have some synergy because she is Nihility with Acheron. but it also requires some sustaining from either Aventurine or Lingsha, and then Xiao the Fox Advisor Boy,
Hmm.
who is also a Fire Nihility, who already has synergy with Acheron himself. So I think predominantly we're going to see her, I would imagine, in mostly break teams with Rappa and then specifically Firefly. I would be interested to see Acheron's numbers with her, but I think Acheron's better served center with, a Kafka Black Swan type situation. But yeah,
So
that's what we're looking at for
I do really quickly
Feud
want
right
to
now.
jump in just on her teams. It is worth noting that she does benefit Rappa and Boot Hill more than Firefly. So if you're having to choose between putting her on, if you have two break teams and you're having to choose between putting her on either, she's going to help Boot Hill and Rappa more because of her exo toughness talent that allows you to break people multiple times even after they've been broken, versus Firefly, who her numbers don't benefit as much from that initial break. She's more of a super break character. So if you keep Imaginary or Harmony Trailblazer in their Trailblazer form after 3.0, or in their Harmony form after 3.0, that character will actually help Firefly more than Fugue. Um, just as a sort of bug in the ear, that if you're having to make that decision, she technically gives more of a DPS boost to those two.
And I guess along those the lines, that's the same theory, I guess, then with the Himiko synergy, in that by breaking twice, you proc Himiko, because when she gets the 3 charges of the
Mm-hmm.
breaking somebody, she gets her follow attack. So I imagine it's in the same lines there. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out when we get some of that MOC data next patch, so we can see how many cycles and what her most popular teams were. Now, moving to other Gacha news, we do have a bit to talk about, because I did want to kind of talk a little bit more about Girls Frontline 2 Auxilium, because we did have that launch technically kind of towards the beginning of December. But here now, playing it a month in, we're into the second month. We've just started our second banner. For those of you unfamiliar, Girls Frontline 2 is an XCOM style, but waifu collector type game. So it's a different genre than the first Girls Frontline. Um, and it's not as mean as XCOM, in that, I mean, there's no 95% chance to hit that's just going to miss and cause you to lose the mission. Basically, every attack will hit, but depending on what angle you're shooting from or how much cover they're behind, it will affect the damage output, but not the chance to hit. Um, so a nice little tweak there to save us some frustration and mind-numbing resets. Um, but I will say that the game had a pretty solid launch. I think I had a good new
Mm-hmm.
player experience. The game has been out for about a year in China, so we do have a little bit of a roadmap in terms of what the meta looks like and strong units and kind of what's to come in that sense. And they kicked off the global servers with one of the best supports in the game, who's still relevant in the meta in China, in Suomi. Even more so if you were able to get one additional copy of her, which I went ahead and did. But Steve, how's your a new player experience been with Girls Frontline?
Again, very solid, very happy with the game. I did not go for a second copy of Suomi. Instead, I got a second copy of Macchiato, I believe is the name of the character. Miyak-
Okay.
Miyako, it's
Yeah,
the
so
sniper girl.
looking at the patches, they did 2 banners at launch. So they did Suomi and Ulrid, who is a sword user, and then the second patch cycle, or I guess the first official big patch right after
Mhm.
launch, we have Macchiato, who's a sniper unit who does have some synergy with Suomi around the ice element, and then they also have Tololo on the banner as well. And I do want to say, while Tololo is a strong unit in and of her own right, it's not recommended to pull on her banner because she is in the standard pool, so you don't need to be going on her limited banner, because you'll probably eventually get her over time from the banners. And I'll explain more about the standard banner in a little bit. But Steve, I wanted to throw back to you, because I did want to clarify, Macchiato came in this patch cycle and not on the launch cycle.
No,
For those that were interested, so that's the banner going on now. Would
cor-
be Macchiato, and then a second one for Tololo.
correct. So she is the current character. Her V2, I believe is the terminology. The second copy of her basically causes it so that one of her abilities has exponential scaling with crit damage. So it makes her very powerful in regards to crit damage because it basically uncaps it, and it can get goofy. But she's very fun. Again, very happy with the game. I was mildly frustrated early on because my standard banner pulls, which again you're going to get to that in a minute, but my standard banner pulls were all weapons. So I am weapon rich, but for a while I was, they call them dolls. I was doll poor, as it were. But that has changed a little bit since. Back over to you, I guess.
Yeah, so I did want to talk a little bit about the standard banner because the game has been out for a month now, and like I mentioned, we are a year behind China and what they've been doing, so we've kind of gotten to see some things. But one thing I did want to touch on specifically as it pertains to the standard banner was it was announced that they are going to be, I believe it's actually next month, so February, they're going to be making the standard banner more of like a player chooses the focus banner. So you'll actually have a focused 5-star character on the banner that you want from, I think, the standard pool. I think Snowbreak does something similar to this on their standard banner as well. So if there is a strong unit that you're looking for, whether it be somebody like Tololo, whether it be somebody like they call her QJ for short, who's probably one of the most popular units to have re-rolled for those that did that. But yeah, if you want to save your standard banner pulls from now until then, you'll have a better chance of focusing in on the SSR unit that you want, as opposed to leaving it up to chance. Now, I will say the other thing too with Girls Frontline too is talk about their pity system a little bit on the banner, because it is 80 pulls for a guaranteed, 5-star SSR, whatever you want to call them, character or weapon. But soft pity kicks in at the 58th pull. So it is worth noting that while 80 would be the hard pity for a guaranteed SSR, soft pity kicks in at 58, which I thought to be an interesting number. It's not a multiple of 5, and it's like, what is that, 22 short of the guaranteed, as opposed to other games where it's like, we'll start kicking in soft pity around like maybe 10 or 15 before. So I just thought number 58 being when soft pity kicked in was funny to me, but I do appreciate the early kick in, as it were. And then plenty of game modes as well to go through, and they if you did start playing during launch and you were doing your boss fight weekly and using all of your tickets in boss fights, you would actually have enough currency if you bought last month to then this month you'll have a Sabrina available to you, because you can buy 15 of her shards, as it were, each month with the boss fight, which is a weekly thing you can do 3 times. And then it resets that specific item in the shop, resets every month. There are some other things that reset weekly, but for her shards, they reset monthly. So you get 15 each month, 30 for a full-on copy, so 2 months, right? So, and Sabrina, while I don't think she holds a strong point necessarily in the meta in China necessarily, I think she's maybe mid to above average. She does have some synergy with Tololo being a water element, which is who I got in my beginner banner pull, so that's what I'm building around. But I absolutely adore Sabrina. There aren't very many like eating waifus out there, but she's adorable, and the fact that like she's just eating pizza in her cutscene for her ultimate skill absolutely cracks me up. Adore her. So we have that going on. They just implemented in this last patch the equivalent of guilds, a guild system. They're called platoons. It's recommended you join a platoon as soon as you can, just for some extra resources, both like growth materials as well as premium currency. Also, through guild tokens in the guild shop, you will have access to Pesha, who's another SSR character that they actually, I think they gave away for free, 1 copy, just for logging into the game. You'll be able to ultimately get dupes of her just by doing guild stuff. Every so month, you'll get a little bit closer. I think it's the similar 15 shards per month, if I'm not mistaken. Could be slightly off on that, but it's going to be time gated as well. but that's Girls Frontline 2. That'll be in my rotation for a healthy bit. I enjoy the XCOM style game and enjoy different game modes and challenges that come with this as well.
I would also mention that there is an auto mode, so if you do not want to engage in the XCOM style play, you want to treat it more as an auto battler, that is also an option as well.
Yes, that is going to be an option, and for easier content or content that you are vastly over leveled for, you'll be just fine. But if you are wanting to get to the more difficult end game stuff, while the AI will get you maybe some serviceable stuff, obviously it's not going to be able to kind of min max if you're trying to do that in regards to the efficiency of moves and like a weekly score. But again, would be serviceable, but you'll be better on manual if you do that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But we'll keep you guys posted on Girls Frontline too. Feel free to leave comments down below. If you have thoughts on that or what you're experiencing with Girls Frontline 2, or come over to our Discord if you want to theory craft and talk about characters there. In other Gacha news, though, we have a couple anniversaries and like half anniversaries going on. So we have in Eversoul, which is an idle Gacha game. They just started their 2nd year anniversary that started just now. Which I jumped back into Eversoul to try that out. And of course, there's a lot of goodies, giveaways. They gave away the new like highest rarity character that they just launched, or they just launched a new character that is the highest rarity or whatever that they have, and they give it away to you for free. And then of course you have to pull for copies if you want to do that. As also part of the rewards, they've given away like a full set of like attack gear, which is really really strong, and it's nice to get gear with good subset, in a good attack set as opposed to like a defense stat, type thing, substats you really want and a gear that you really want. So they're giving that away, as well as a bunch of other goodies, and of course the free costumes that they give out just for kind of doing the events every day are always kind of nice. I appreciate that when a game doesn't hide costumes behind real money currency. So be sure to check that out if you're into that game or into that style. Brown Dust 2 is having their 1.5 year anniversary, and for Brown Dust 2, they have reruns of some limited costumes going on. They have some new limited costumes, and then some other non-limited costumes for characters that are coming out. Plenty of pulls on top of your daily free pull. I think they're giving out close to I think it was 100 to 150 pulls. I think over the course of the anniversary, they have a fun little event, Devil Survivor or Vampire Survivor type mini game going on, just with a Brown Dust 2 flair on it. So if you enjoy that type of mini game, you can do that for some additional goodies. And then they also introduced a new way to kind of passively get some of the growth or ascension materials in the cafe mode now. So you can kind of idly passively run a cafe, which has guests that come in that you can interact with, which leads to their own cutscenes and some other lobby interactions, I guess I'll say. Which, Brown Dust 2 definitely has an aesthetic, and that will cater to that for sure. But then lastly, in other news, again, game that is near and dear to my heart, Nikkei. We have our New Year's event going on, and they've finally done it. They've finally given Rappy an SSR version. Rappy Red Hood, not to be confused with the unit Red Hood. It's her own unit. She's finally got an SSR version, which players have been asking for a long time and wondering when we were going to get it, because she is lore-wise the commander's most trusted, and most competent fighter in the Nikkei universe. So the fact she finally got an SSR version has been great. We have a couple battle passes going on with some skins that you can spend money on, $15 or $20 or so. And then they do have the Gacha skin going on as well for Naga, which Gacha skins in Nikkei are essentially going to run you about $60 and give you some other growth and pull material if you wanted to do that. But really excited about all these. A lot of fun Christmas, New Year events that are going on, but those are the big ones that I wanted to touch on. And those are the ones that I'm actively in my daily rotation. We do want to wish everybody a happy new year. Hopefully, you guys had a great holiday, and thank you for joining us this week. We are back. Let us know down below, what keeps you guys coming back to Gacha games? What makes a game something that goes into your rotation for Gachas for the day? Or conversely, what makes a game fall out of your rotation in the Gachaverse? If you did enjoy this episode and you'd like to show support for the show, be sure to like, follow, subscribe to the channel down below. Always email us at brohoyopod@gmail.com with questions or suggestions for the show. We also have a link to our Discord in the description, so you can join us over there for some news, game nights, content notifications, or if you want a theory craft on any teams in Girls Frontline 2 or any other gacha you guys are playing. Be sure to join us next week when we discuss Natlan's 5.3 Archon Quest. But until then, keep gaming.
We made a choice, go fight against your fate.